right, here we go. Back with another episode, and back with a previous guest who we had on a few months ago, and I'm excited to talk. And on that episode, when we had Kenny on, I mentioned, "Hey man, when you do your 100 miler, you got to come back so we can kind of break it all down." And he was kind enough to do that. So today we have runner and owner of Recovery Hill, Kenny Hill. What's going on, man?
Yeah, I appreciate being on, man. I guess I should say happy Tuesday. Um,
Yeah. Oh, Kenny. Hey, you know what? I appreciate that you listen to the show. Um, I was hoping this would be a debt-free night, but look at her ghost is still present. I appreciate
Literally,
that.
I had that loaded for her and she didn't show up. I had that preloaded for her and she
I'm
didn't
gonna
show up.
text her
So
later and she's gonna be bummed about that. She's gonna be
yeah,
bummed.
yeah. Um,
Say, hey, I gotta say
yeah,
this too, man. If anybody's not watching the video and they're only listening to the recording, man, I feel like the mustache is even stronger this time than it was before. Very, very
yeah.
curly on the ends.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I maybe I put in a little extra wax in here, got show ready. So yeah.
I appreciate that, man. As you can tell, I have no facial hair. I've never been able to grow it, and I always tell people, they're like, "Why don't you ever grow like a beard or anything?" I tell them it grows in like Joe Dirt, like all white, trashy. There's patches that just never grow hair. I'm like, I can't do it. And my wife's like, I don't want you to do that because she's seen it before, and she's like,
Yeah.
Nah, I'm good. I'm good. So good for you, man.
Mine was the same way for years. In fact, that was kind of my joke I would used to use. I'd say, with my white trashy DNA, this is the best that you're gonna get from me. And so yeah, that's somehow, like late 30s, I actually started becoming a man a little bit, and my my facial hair, at least in the beard part, began growing in. The mustache, it was weird. Like I had a mustache in seventh grade. It was like, like,
Oh, you're one of those guys.
yeah, I was one of those guys. It was like, where like seventh and eighth grade is a hard time for people because of the transition. I
Sure.
was like, I was in my element at that age. I was like, okay, I got a mustache. I had some kind of chest muscles a little bit. I felt like like the big dog a little bit, and then it's
Jeez.
all been downhill since. It's all been
I don't know if that's true, but yeah, I remember some guys in middle school like that, and it's like, are you going to class? Or are you dropping kids off? Like, what is going on? Like full beard, full goatee, full grown men, and then yeah, I guess for them, yeah, they didn't really grow much after that. It was kind of that was the peak for them.
yeah, yeah. Definitely peaked in seventh grade.
Yeah. Hey, it doesn't matter though because you're doing awesome things now, running a lot of miles, man. Um, so that's like I said, that's why we wanted to have you back on here is because you did your first ultra. And I don't know if I told you this when you were on the show last, but for some reason, well, I'm not gonna say for some reason, we had a guest on Bree a couple years ago when we first started this podcast, and she's an ultra runner. She's the owner of Running Pods, or one of the owners of Running Pods, and she was awesome. And then through that, we met our friend of the show, Paul Marshall, and a couple of other people. But for whatever reason, man, I feel like runners seem to be drawn to the show ever since we connected with Bree, and so it's fitting that we have you on here. And I think people are going to be really interested to hear kind of your journey. And as you were mentioning before we started recording, um, this is kind of like the first time you're really going to be chatting about everything you went through. And obviously anybody who knows the ultra running world, or who is connected with someone in that world, it is an emotional thing. I've done a couple of marathons and a few marathons, and they've talked about at the wall people start breaking down emotionally. Very different thing for a 100 miler. I'm sure you have that point at some point along that run, but um it's just crazy that you did that, man. And you guys need to go back and listen to the previous episode with Kenny to really understand his passion for it and where it comes from. But all that being said, man, I'm gonna stop talking. I want to hear a little bit about this 100 miler. First off, when did you start training for it? And then when was the actual race?
Yeah, you're gonna get me on that one. Like I can't remember dates. I have a traumatic brain injury, and so that's my excuse. So, I would say, I want to say maybe there is like so December, yeah, around December last year, which so close to a year ago, so you said my first ultra, so it's my first 100 miler, but the first
Right.
ultra I did was the second run I did, which was a 31-mile run around a track. And then
Right.
the third run I did was it was a 12-hour run where my goal there was to do 50 miles. I got 55. Um, and that was like my first official race, like whatever sanctioned race or whatever. And then I did the 100 kilometers. So that's correct me if I'm, I think that's 62 miles. And then
Okay.
so but it was after the 12-hour run in December of last year, um, where I had this, okay, so I want to venture out to do 100 miler, and just kind of take that from there, because doing a little bit more than I had anticipated I was capable of doing was just, it kind of blew my mind. The experience was on that 12, it was extremely cold, and I had mild hypothermia in that experience, and it was a pretty incredible experience. So that kind of opened up my mind to be like, okay, you know what, I think I want to try a 100. um and it was in that kind of period of time, I happened to have some pretty significant Achilles injuries, and on both my left and right Achilles. So um, I think the time of when I wanted to do the 100, I just didn't have enough time. So what I ended up doing was a 100K instead of a 100 miler, just to give enough time to make sure I'm not going to snap my Achilles. And then later on, when in I think it was 2 months after, maybe 3 months after the 100-kilometer run, that I did the 100 miles. So, um, all in all, I think I've been running for close. It's getting closer to 2 years now, is how much time I've been actually running. And then, yeah, so I guess that's kind of the timeline.
Okay. And yeah, you're right. 100%. You've done ultras. No, I always forget what basically qualifies as an ultra. What mileage is it where you start getting into that ultra territory?
I think it's technically anything beyond a marathon, so beyond 26.2, but I if you look at like races and stuff, it's generally they go to that 50K mark, or so that 31 miler mark. And then that's kind of where you start being able to say you did an ultra. But I think the 100 miler, I think that's kind of the the thing that people are seeking out to go and do, kind of getting that nice round number.
I'm gonna blame that on a common connection we have, Ray Sanchez, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know him. I've met him a few times. I don't know him personally, but I know a bunch of people that I'm close with have a real close relationship with him. And I feel like anytime they were with him, he was doing these. It was always it's like he doesn't do anything less than 100. It seems like he probably does, but in my mind, I'm like that dude only runs 100 miles, doesn't do anything less. And
Yeah.
some of the stuff he does is insane too. Some of like the bad water and it's like what 135.
Yeah, he's
Geez,
done
it's crazy.
Badwater 135, which is in the desert. So I think it got close to 130 degrees or something this year. It's crazy. And I think this was year 15 for him. I think it was year 15 in a row. So he's kind of like he just runs it every year as a part of his thing. So yeah, in the 100-kilometer run that I did, um, I I was running, and I think I might have mentioned this when on the first episode, but that's when I met Ray.
Yeah.
And so he's just sitting there at an aid station helping. So after that, he said, "Hey, anytime, reach out to me," and he meant it. So I reached out to him. He gave me, on Instagram, gave me his number, and then just started communicating with him, and he's been really helpful. He started, we'd check in almost on a weekly basis. I just kind of give him kind of what I was doing and how my Achilles are going, and he kind of helped navigate that for me so that I was able to get to the finish line essentially, but not tear my Achilles. And he really walked me through that process of training. And so, I'm getting ready to go and do this run. Uh, and and then I'm like, hey, so yeah, I got this run coming up. I've been tapering to, allow my body to rest for the run, asking him for any advice. He seems to be one of those people that you text and then he calls back. So
Sure.
you got to have him on the show. He's a wealth of information about this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he calls me back and I'm just kind of talking to him. Okay, so I got this run. It's this week, and he's like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I'm gonna run too." So he has a torn meniscus, and he's like, "Yeah, I think I'm gonna get out there and get some miles in." I'm like, "Okay, well, where are you running?" Yeah, and he says the name of it, and it's the one I'm running. I'm like, "Dude, that's the one I'm running." He's like, "Oh,
Wow.
okay, cool. So I'll see you out there. What time are you gonna be out there?" And he starts just kind of goes
Yeah.
into making the plans. Oh, okay, I'm gonna be out there at 6, and so we just get into the plans. So he just shows up on a whim to get miles in, ends up winning the 100,
Jeez.
ends up winning. He's 55. He's 55, torn
Jeez.
meniscus, beats the field, right?
And
In the
just decided
100.
he was going to run. He's like, yeah, I think I'll do it today.
Yeah, he's like, I'm going to get some miles in. And then he wins 100. This
Jeez.
guy's an
Well,
animal. He's
that's
55.
a good guy to have on your side for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeez, man. So now remind me, which run did you do? Which race did you do?
It was called the Ride to Walk. I hope I'm getting the name right. I got the thing back there. I can go grab it. But Ride to Walk. And yeah, so that was an interesting one. Uh, around, they're a newer race, I think. Not that I'm like some race historian, but um, and they had a last minute change in terms of the course. Like, think about a week before the course, all of a sudden the course had completely changed, and so that was a unique situation, I guess. But yeah, that I think that leads into some of this, like the experience of actually, the run itself, and it was just a weird run for me. It was such a weird run, and I'm still kind of processing through it, because part of it was I was just resentful at the race coordinator and the not the staff. The staff were great, and the coordinator he was a really nice guy too. But like, yeah, just so weird, so weird. I'm not typically running in this resentful state, and like it was a resentful state I was for probably 60 miles of that run. But yeah,
Really? Well, and so
yeah.
that's interesting because I feel like that's one of those things where you guys are, and again, I don't know the ultra world, but I would imagine that you do all this training, you do all this planning, you're preparing your body in a certain way, you're preparing your mind in a certain way, and then everything changes. And now it kind of, like you said, it puts you into a different mind state. And running in a more calm state, I imagine, is very different than running in a resentful state or an angry state. And that changes everything from your pace to your breathing to, I mean, to everything. So now, were you aware of that feeling the whole time, or was it, around like mile 60? It was like, I've been running 60 miles, just angry. Like, at what point did you realize, okay, this is just my mindset right now, and I'm not gonna be able to shake it?
It was somewhere around mile 40 where like what they have is they have like a board, like is a television, and it kind of show you what lap you're on. And their track was a little over a mile. I can't remember the exact distance, but a little over a mile loop.
Okay.
Okay, so this was essentially like I went into it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to run 100 loops. So okay, and then so yeah, I get to around mile 40, and I peek over at the thing, and then I'm just kind of I'm looking at at it on the mileage. I'm seeing my name in the mileage, like what in the world? And then I take a look at my watch, and it's a mile off.
Oh,
So I'm like, what the heck? Like, why, that I can't remember if it was exactly 40, but let's say it was 40, on the board it says 40 and my watch says 41. I'm like, what in the world? So I'm like, okay, I finished the next loop and I come around and I ask the guy, one of the main guys, hey, what's going on? Like, that has me off exactly a mile. So I think it missed a loop. And at that point, when you've run that many miles, missing one loop, like you want to make sure you're getting your loop count. You want to, and I'm like,
Sure.
did somehow, has anybody reported that they've been off, and blah, blah, blah. And I kind of sat there for maybe 30 seconds because I wanted to keep moving. But they're like, no, like it's right. And they kind of ran down the mile splits. I'm like, that all sounds about right. There's one in there that feels kind of weird to me, but other than that, that all sounds about right. Okay, so chalk it up to the watch being off. Kept running, and sure enough, like as the miles accrued, I kept being off, and then I would notice, okay, now I'm 2 miles off. Now I'm 3 miles off. And then toward the end, I'm 4 miles off. So I finished with 104 miles. Um, According to them, it was 100 miles. And according to I'll just say there were other runners that I asked, like, hey, where was your watch at? And um all the 100 people that I asked were 4 miles off. Right. So
Oh,
I'm like, okay. So
ooh,
so it was kind of like this thing in the midst of afterwards, you're like, okay, wow, I was able to do 104 instead of 100. And actually, psychologically, if they had told me I still hadn't reached that, I would have kept going to 110, 115. I was going to keep going until I got finished. I knew psychologically I was in a space where I would have just kept going.
sure.
But in the midst of it, it was this anger, like, and I'm like, I try not to be this person that walks around in resentment, and my sobriety and my recovery is taught me that much. And I know for me, stress and resentment, and if you ask me, in my opinion, stress and resentment are the two number one killers that cause other sort of killers. Um but so I try not to carry that stuff around as much as possible, but this was just like grinding physically and emotionally. And so there were just, yeah, there it was a weird kind of thing to be in this, have this heaviness of resentment toward the race itself while I'm completing it. So the race almost became like this thing that I was mad at. And
Hmm.
it kind of took me, it did allow me to learn a little bit about, I guess, that weird thing, but it did take me out of the present moment in some of the stuff. So yeah, it was a weird experience. One thing you had said when you started mentioning like how this show attracts runners, it could just be that you're attracted as guests to people that are like doing challenging things,
True.
and this ultra scene is growing for all those types of weirdos, right? All those types of weird people that are into doing very challenging things.
Sure.
It's kind of it's growing in that way. And so I say that to say, like, it's such a cool thing, the ultra scene, because you're out there with, I was out there with an 81-year-old man who had been doing ultra since like 85 or something.
Wow.
So he was out there getting in his 100 miles. He's 81 years old. I was out there with another individual named Lindsay Boston, who just incredible human being. One of the most her medical story is I've never heard of the medical conditions that she has and the amount of medical conditions that she has. And she was out there getting in her miles. And she was, so the race had 100 miles. They had a few different races. Like one was like a 12-hour race, I think. One was a 24-hour race. One was 100 miles. One was a 48-hour race. So they had all these different like race things within it. And she's out there with a walker, with a tube coming out of her chest, and a RN going around with her, and she's out there getting in her miles and stuff. Um, uh, and I guess I was going to mention I'm going to be starting a podcast, and I think she's going to probably be one of my first guests, because it's on this topic of resiliency and stuff. But anyway, so you get to, I guess what I'm saying is, you get to be out there with incredible people. Um, there was a 12-year-old out there. There was a 13-year-old out there who was the race director's daughter. Um, and so you get to be out there with this wide range of people, and then you get to be out there with legends. Freaking Ray Sanchez just shows up. And then the Joker, or I'm sorry, the Jester showed up. The Jester, if so, the Jester is he's kind of famous. He's ran more ultra marathons than anybody alive, and he's done like a TED Talks and stuff. So he's a very positive, like giant man. And his like walking stride is like 3 of my jogging strides. So, but I got to be out there with the Jester for he wears like a jester hat the whole time he's out there, just and he has like kind of like a clown jester suit that he wears the whole time while he's doing his miles. And he was doing a 2-day race, and so I got to be out there with him for probably um 5-6 miles or so, just soaking in his knowledge and just kind of being there with him. And then as we kind of cross each other's paths on the loop, and, hey Kenny, how you doing? Hey Ed, how you doing? And just keep going, and so um yeah, it's a weird sport where I don't think there's another sport where you can be out there and be amongst legends in the sport, and some of the top dogs in the sport, and then just be out there with your next door neighbor who is Joe Schmo. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it is a weird sport for sure. And it's interesting too, because I feel like the people I've come in contact with that are really into it and who have done multiple races, they always seem to talk about how it is a very welcoming
Mm-hmm.
environment. It's not a lot of there's not a lot of, like, you're competing. It's technically a race, but I think there's such a wide variety of people that are out there, and the reasons why they're doing it is very different, right? You have some people that their whole purpose maybe to win the race, and for another person it might be their first time doing it, and they just want to prove to themselves that they can do 100 miles. And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting that there's so many different goals, so many different visions for what they're trying to accomplish, and yet like you said, you're all rubbing shoulders, you're all connecting, and you're all you guys get along, which is a really interesting thing, and everybody's willing to share the information and have those conversations, which I think is a pretty cool thing. And I mean, it fits perfectly into the show, right? The idea of being more connected, connectable, and it seems like a place where people are able to get connected. Well, and I think as a personal thing too, it seems like it's a place where you're in a weird way connecting even more with yourself, right? Like you're kind of having to look at some of those demons in the face as you're running 80, 90, 100 miles, and you're
Yeah.
probably learning stuff about yourself. And obviously, because of what you do, the nature of your work, the different things that you've gone through, I mean, I'm sure you've examined your own self, your own mind quite a bit. But do you feel like even in these moments, obviously we talked about the resentment part of it, but do you feel like there's, even from you go from mile 0 to mile 100, do you feel like you learn things about yourself along the way that you didn't know when you first started that race?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Like, so you learn experience, or you learn. Hmm, I want to try to answer the question thoroughly, but okay, so you're learning aspects of just the running game in general, because it's like, in terms of just the sport of it, like the nutrition, the hydration, the how to take care of your feet, when to stop, when to not stop, what stretches to not do, because that's going to all of a sudden light up your hip, and all these different sorts of things. I think when I hear like Courtney Dauwalters and some of these, like, the top dogs in the sport, and they always seem to talk about how they're learning new things still, and they're constantly learning like little tricks and little things of what to do to help them in that moment of physical despair. And so that was something that I learn in just about any sort of longer run. It's just kind of trying to see, does this work nutritionally? What about this? How's this going? So from that standpoint, in terms of just doing the actual race and the sport of it, I'm a low carb individual. I've been that way for years, and so it's not the best sport for the low carb athlete, at least starting out, because there's very very high caliber, one of the best 200 milers on the planet. Mike McKnight he's a low carber, and then you got Jeff Browning, he's a low carb guy. So there's a growing thing of that, of the low carb athlete in this ultra community.
I'm
I
sorry.
just haven't figured it out. So
So I'm
yeah.
going to interrupt you real quick there. Did you learn that you were the low carb athlete while you were learning the sport of ultra running, or is that something you knew about yourself prior to getting into the sport?
Yeah, and I've been low carb for probably 6, close to 7 years or something like that.
Okay, gotcha.
So I knew getting into the sport. So I didn't really know of any other people other than Zach Bitter. So Zach Bitter, who's, he did hold the record for the 100-mile run. He did it at like a 7-minute mile pace or something ridiculous over the course of 100 miles. And yeah, just crazy. He was recently beat, but I think he's trying to do it again. Anyway, so he's a low carb guy. And so I tried listening to interviews with him, but I couldn't really get good details of it. So the whole time it's been kind of like me, and still it's kind of trying to learn what works and how to do it. And so I learned a lot in this run where Ray has a sponsor called Hammer Nutrition who works with them. And so he like basically he has these liquid calories that he mixes in with the water, and they're kind of flavorless and kind of bland, which you would think is awful, but after you've eaten nothing but terrible sugar, like and like candy for 6 hours or 7 hours, you don't want any more sugar, even if you have the sweetest tooth in the world. So just eating, like having like a super bland, carb dense, calorie dense water is helpful. So just kind of learning some of that stuff, like for me, not to be too graphic, but it was like, I every lap for probably about 7 or 8 miles, from in between miles 30 to 37 ish, I was stopping in the porta potty. Every lap I was stopping in the porta potty
Oh
because my
man.
stomach was so messed up. Yeah, that was kind of brutal. And then when I kind of switched over to um uh this different source of carbohydrates, and kind of taking in some of what Ray had there on hand, it just kind of changed up the game for me, and I was able to minimize those visits throughout the rest of the day, or night. So yeah, and then like there's a bunch of different things that were interesting. I around the same topic of that, like I I detoxed myself from caffeine for like 2 weeks prior to the run. And then I waited until probably about midnight to 1 at night during the run to take in my first caffeine source. And it
Hmm.
was as it was just the biggest like cheat code. It was just the craziest thing to take in some caffeine, and then like, and then I had a good about 10 miles where I'm cranking miles in, just like boom 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 boom.
What's the
Ray's like
caffeine
it.
of what's the caffeine of choice in that moment?
So two sources. One is just like coffee.
Sure.
So like a coffee. And then for me, like I brought caffeine gum out with me.
Ah,
So each piece is like basically has the caffeine content of a cup of coffee. So I would chew on the gum, and and I'm a uh, ex nicotine user. And one of the ways I got off of nicotine was with nicotine gum. And so what you would do with nicotine gum is you'd kind of chew on it, activate the nicotine. And then since I dipped, that was my way I took in nicotine. I would just pocket it right in the same place I would dip, just
ah,
pocket the gum right there. And that was a something that helped me get off of nicotine years ago. But so I was doing that the same thing in the run. I would kind of chew on it a little bit and then just pocket it, keep running, and then chew on the nicotine gum, pocket, keep running. That was like, I don't know, like that was a major athletic booster for me
oh, for sure.
during the night hours. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting too about you, you're mentioning all of these different things, especially when it comes to the physical part of it, that you have to learn. And there's always something new to learn. And that these people who are at the top of the game are always learning something about themselves. It is like a never ending like treadmill, right? Because uh how you're running now, if you're still running and doing these ultras in 10 years, you're older, your body's changed, you've experienced more, you have way more miles in your body. And so all of those things factor into what you need to do. So it's like you can never, it's like you're never running the a new race as the same person, right? Like there's always these little changes you have to do because your body keeps changing and you're aging and all these different things. So it is a pretty fascinating thing. I mean, I guess you could say that for any athlete, but for you guys, it seems a little bit different because what you're doing is so extreme,
Mm.
so it makes sense. It's just like it's a constant cycle of learning, and there's always something new. And it's cool that, again, going back to this connection piece where you have so many connections at these races now and people that you see at different races and at different events. It's like you said, it's a wealth of knowledge, and you can rub shoulders with people that have been doing it for a long time. And then I'm sure you'll get to a point where you have more people behind you in experience, and now you can pass that knowledge on to them. And it's just like this ever growing, ever evolving thing, which is, I think, is a cool place to learn, right on the spot there.
Yeah, it's I can't imagine I can't imagine somebody like Ray Sanchez or somebody who's been doing this sport forever to like for them to have that much change or growth as to like what I'm doing because I'm new to it, right? Um uh but I don't know how you can do something like that and then like so the change is even just like I said for Ray, it's like okay, um I'm going to put in some miles today. So I'm going to go around 100 miles. I mean, you got to think about the mental development to get to the place to where you're just like, oh, I'm going to get in some miles. I'm going to do a 100 this weekend. Let's go do that.
Oh,
And just to kind of roll with this thing, I'm not there. But yeah, I don't know. It's inspiring to me though that somebody is able to adapt that much to something so extreme. And then
right.
now you got the 200s and the 250-mile runs that are now growing in popularity. And so like awesome. Yeah.
Man, it's wild. Now, let me ask you, I've seen you, your videos, your pictures on Instagram and all that. I see the headphones in. I imagine you're listening to music. Maybe you're listening to podcasts, or maybe it's a mixture of both. But if it is music, what are three must-have songs in your running playlist?
Um just gonna put me on the spot a little bit here. So I have a playlist and I'm always kind of adding to it.
Sure.
So I I leverage it. I try to leverage my dopamine system and be as cool, calm, and collective through the first 70% of the run as possible. And then the last 30% is when I'm putting in music. And that's when I'm using that to try to drive up even more dopamine to finish strong. And so in almost all of my long runs, my split times get faster and faster toward the end.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the 100 miler, like my split times get faster and faster, and my miles get faster and faster toward the end. And so part of that is purely just the fuel that music can give you.
Sure.
So one of the things I'll do is I'll put in like a meditation sound for a good like, I guess it depends on how long I'm running, but like if I'm running like I'm running 18 miles uh for a training long run in 2 days. So for about 10 miles of that is just going to be meditation music. And then that's like I'm purposely going into a state of meditation that I do, and then going into a state of prayer, and then going into a state of just kind of seeing what comes up, and kind of giving open space for whatever internal dialogue wants to come up, and then kind of go with that, like kind of just talk it out and walk it out with whatever internal dialogue comes up in that time. And then I'll put on something like a podcast, right? Like
Sure.
and that kind of changes in terms of what I'm into. And sometimes I'll put something on that I'm kind of think will be really good to listen to. I'm just like, oh, I'm not feeling this right now,
Yeah.
and I'll put on like a story podcast, and then that'll be like, okay, this is great. Like, let's listen to whatever story on whatever. But and then we'll put on some music. So I can look and see. It depends, man. It's like if it's like uh let's say marathon-ish distance plus,
Sure.
then I really like some worship music.
Okay.
I really like some worship music,
Sure.
and the worship songs that go ridiculously long. They're like 7 to 11
Sure.
minutes.
I was just
They
telling my
just
wife
keep
about that.
going.
Yeah. Like, when is this
Yeah,
song going to end?
yeah. It just keeps going and going.
Yeah.
So I like those. And because of all the different neurotransmitters that are firing off and all the different sort of things that are going on at that state of a run, you really feel connected, right? You're like
Sure.
really in it and connected to what you're hearing. So there's some of that. I like uh, there's so much different stuff. Gasoline lollipop. So some um really high intensity, like folk music,
Sure.
which I know those two things don't sound like they go in the same sentence, but they do. And then it might be some kind of old school hip hop, and then it might be something like NF's recent album or something, that
Sure.
sort of thing.
So really,
Uh,
it really is all over the place. But it's
yeah.
that's why I wanted to ask you, because I feel like I've heard that over the years from different people. Because I think someone who maybe new to it would think, okay, you're putting your body through hell. You're doing this endurance race where you're gonna have to push your body to the very limits. I imagine it's like some death metal, like high intensity hip hop, all these different things. And then they're like, well, I think one of my big songs is a Jack Johnson song. Like, what? Like some
Yeah.
acoustic Jack Johnson? And it's like, yeah. And so I think everything you just said is I'm glad you said that, because I think it paints a really cool picture of that the headphones are actually playing for someone who's in those types of races, because
Mhm.
it really is a flow, and it's not just like you can't just go all intensity right away. There's kind of a flow to everything that you do, including the song choices or the podcast or the meditation music. And so that's why I wanted to ask that question, because I figured you'd be in line with everybody else I've talked to. But it is very interesting hearing that, because it's not like a 30-minute like hit workout, right? You're not just
Mhm.
pushing. You have to get to 100 miles. And you
Yeah.
can't kill yourself at the very beginning. You got to kind of let it, kind of ride that wave. So it's just always fun asking runners what they're listening to, because and like you said, it goes from folk to worship to, NF or hip hop, whatever it might be. So very,
By the way,
very interesting.
we uh we we got to broaden this. So is it you don't like country music? Is it the pop country that you don't like? What is it? What kind of country music are you listening to?
Oh, I'm not listening to any country music. I don't. It goes from the pop country music to like the like the very, very like real, authentic country music. Everything in between.
Mm,
It's just never been my thing. Now, I will tell you this. I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before. The one place where I remember country music sounding the best to me made no sense because it's the one of the things I love the most in this world. And you and I connected on this. It's the baseball field. When I was playing high school baseball and we were, doing BP and you were out in center field shagging balls, they would play some kind of country music, and I'm like, it does feel right out here. Like I don't like this music, but out here it would be like Red Hot Chili Peppers, then some country song. I'm like, it makes sense. It makes
mm,
sense. So in my entire life, that's the one place where I'm like, it's not bad out here for
mm,
whatever reason. But I don't know what it is, man. I just can't. I can't. I've tried. I can't get into it. And you can name any country
mm,
star. Doesn't matter who it is. I can. And I was telling someone this the other day. Maybe it was my wife. There's so many elements of country music that I should love because I love movies. I love storytelling. I love all those different things, and that's basically what country music is all about, right? Like people love the story and the imagery that they paint with country
mm.
music. I just can't get into it. I'm a hip hop guy. I've always loved hip hop, and I'm just kind of stuck there.
Yeah, I mean, I respect hip hop too. Yeah, I guess that's a callback to another episode, but yeah, I heard you say you didn't like country music, and automatically my assumption is like, well, that's because he's listening to the pop. He's listening to pop with the twang, and that's that's what he's listening to. And fair enough, he shouldn't like that stuff. But okay, yeah, I don't know. I might have to send you some stuff.
What's good country music to you? Like an artist.
Yeah, like so you use the word like authentic country. That's it. So if it's stuff from like let's say 85 or prior, then that's some good country music.
Okay,
Yeah, and then there's like a recent resurgence with that real classic country music coming back with people and newer artists.
sure.
And so that's pretty cool. You had the um what is it, Anthony Oliver,
Okay.
or is it, did I say his name backwards?
Oh
he
yeah,
had the
yeah,
big hit that kind of blew up on YouTube.
sure,
And so there's that style of just more acoustic, very lyrically driven. It's not the lyrics aren't getting lost in the overall big sound of the pop style sound, and it's just kind of keeping it very raw. And so you like country music, you're supposed to just feel deeply. You just
sure.
like you feel the language, you feel the story, you feel whatever it is very deeply. And so yeah, I think the unfortunate thing is there's so many like whether this is a general problem with pop in general. This is a weird place to take this podcast right
Not at all. We've gone to stranger places, so this
now.
is okay.
Yeah, my problem with pop in general is you have fantastic, talented singing musicians like that they just get lost in the sound. You
Sure,
don't even know that they're so talented. And
sure.
then the rare time that they do acoustic song or something, you're like, oh my God, like that's amazing. Actually, the song's not that bad. And their
Yeah.
voice is incredible. Like I feel like all the stuff they do with the sound just kind of loses it. But anyway.
Well, I thought I heard somebody on a podcast. This is maybe a couple years ago. I feel like Aretha Franklin mentioned that Ariana Grande is one of the best vocalists she's ever heard of this recent
Whoa.
group. And you hear something like that coming from her, it's like, huh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. But I mean, kind of to your point, you think of someone like Ariana Grande, big pop star, a lot of music videos, the imagery, the visuals, it all kind of drowns out the talent. But for someone like a legend like that to say that about her, it's like, oh, like she must have some incredible vocals that are, and I know she's a great singer, but like I didn't realize to the extent that she was. But if you have someone like that saying that, you must be pretty good.
Yeah, I want to hear it. Like now I want to hear it. Like
I know,
let me
seriously,
get a
seriously.
acapella thing going on. But yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, so sorry, that's my thing about the country. So, and I've changed my tone a little bit. I used to just be more general and say I hate country. I respect it. I just it's not something that hits my ears the same way as everybody else. I've tried
Yeah.
quite a few times, and Like I said, I understand why people love it. I can't get behind it. I just can't.
You just got to be out shagging BP, and then you
That's pretty much it.
know that's when you're hearing it.
Hey man, at 35 years old, I would still love to do that. So if that's what it takes, I'd go out there again.
Yeah, yeah, man. Yeah. I don't know. Did you want to talk more about the run?
Yeah, sorry. Well, let me ask you again, kind of a silly question, but you mentioned a little bit the nutrition and all that stuff. And I again, having some connection to people that have been with Ray on some of his big, they were part of his crew for the 135 and Badwater and all that stuff. I'll never forget this. They said that one of the things that he used to enjoy eating before a race was French fries. And I think there's probably so many people out there that if you don't know that world of ultra running or endurance sports, you probably think, well, these people probably eat. It's probably like a kale milkshake or a kale smoothie before the race, and they probably don't eat any meat. And they're probably all, I mean, they probably have all these misconceptions. And he's like, no, I'm one of the best in the world, and I eat a plate full of French fries before the race. So for you, what is and then obviously with like the marathon training, I remember hearing people talk about how, the CIM, the CIM is the only one I've done, right? And I remember on the packet of the CIM stuff, it said something about like, here are the local spaghetti factories if you wanted to go there before the race. And so people kind of have that idea of the carb loading. But for you, kind of two questions here. What do you eat before the race? And then once you're done with it all, like the 100 miler, what was the thing that you're like, I just need that in my system right now?
So afterwards, like you're not feeling much.
Sure.
Um, so we have this kind of thing with my family. So we are a low carb family. Uh, all of us are, but so prior to, I guess, let me answer prior to is like I'm taking in some electrolytes. Let's see. If it's prior to a race, I'm not taking in coffee because I'm going to wait and use that till later. But so I'm going to take in some electrolytes. I'm going to take in like an English muffin with some honey on it, some peanut butter, and then that's pretty much it. So I try to keep it as light as possible. Um, and that's I've just in terms of running, I found that my stomach doesn't get too messed up with that, and it
Sure.
stays fine with that. And like that's on the races. Like if I'm just like on this 18 miler coming up, this long training run that I'm going to do in 2 days, I'm going to probably do that fasted. Like I can go around up to 20 miles without having any like just being fasted and being fine.
Sure.
And then I start to cramp pretty bad somewhere around mile 20. So I have to start to take in a little bit of carbohydrates, um, but on the longer, more extended ones, I'm just kind of starting off with something pretty gentle, or pretty light. And then, yeah. And then after the run, it kind of depends. So there's two pizza places. It kind of depends on where
Nice.
we're at. So we're either getting Chicago Fire, the deep dish at Chicago Fire, or there's a place up where we live in Amador called Gold Dust Pizza, and this place
Oh, okay.
like it's incredible. So my family will come up to visit us,
Yeah.
but every time they have to have the pizza. So
Sure.
literally what's happening is they'll
Yeah.
drive up to visit us, but we know what they really want. They want that pizza. So they're going to come up and get the pizza. But so yeah, I have a thing of if I'm doing like if I'm doing a marathon or more, then we'll get a pizza. And so my boys love it when I do more than a marathon.
I
They're like,
bet.
yay,
It's like, get out there, pops.
yeah. And come on, Dad, go run, get out there.
Yeah.
We need some pizza tonight. So that's kind of it. Yeah, like and I think I'll mature as I go, like as I listen to other low carb athletes and runners, like Mike McKnight is one of them. He's talked a lot about that, how he did that a lot. and he would continue to kind of stay swollen. And then it wasn't until he just would throw a steak on the grill and eat a steak where all of a sudden that took care of a lot of the inflammatory issues that he had and stuff. So
Interesting.
hopefully I'll mature a little bit with that. But it's one of those things where it's like when you put in that many miles, or you exert your body to that extent, you begin to say, okay, what are some of my cheap pleasures in life that I'm normally not going to eat? I'll very rarely eat. Let me have that and take some, yeah.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
No. So let me ask you this, because I just recently finished up this like 2 week fitness challenge with one of my brothers. Um, and it was based off calories. We both at the end of it, like, we're like, this was a stupid idea, because I was staying up way too late in on a stationary bike and all this stuff. It was fun at first, and then I got to the end of the week, I'm like, or the end of the second week, I'm like, I don't want to do any more exercising. Obviously, you're going well beyond that, but we burnt a lot of calories during that time. How many calories do you burn during 100-mile run?
I don't know. Let me see.
I mean,
Do you,
it's gotta be insane.
do you want me to look it up?
Yeah, I would love for you to look it up. That'd be awesome. I need to know the number, because I mean, just the amount of calories him and I burned during the 2 weeks it felt ridiculous. And I mean, the longest run I did was a 14 and a half, no, excuse me, uh, 15-mile run. I did a 15-mile run, and don't want to do that for a little while. Wasn't enjoyable, but
Yes, it was 13,035 calories approximately. Approximately.
jeez, man.
Yeah, so 13,000 calories approximately. It was a 28 28 hours and 17 minutes. So yeah.
Well, you earned the pizza. You earned a couple pizzas.
Yeah, I think I I just was not feeling the pizza that day. It
Sure.
Chicago Fire was off that day, to be fair. Like they were off their game that day. Bad day to be off their game, but
Yeah,
it was not hitting my palate very well.
man.
Yeah.
So do your boys know? Like, I mean, because they're all still fairly young, right? So they probably don't know the extent of what you're doing. But do they just know that, hey, Dad's going out for a long run, and it's going to be a couple hours before we see him again? Or, like, do they have any kind of understanding of what's going on? Because I see you out there, and you have them in some different sports and stuff like that, which is always fun to see. But, like, specifically for what you do they really have a concept of what you're doing? Like, were they out there with you at any point of the 100-miler?
Yeah, so that was one of the really cool things. That's a great question, Josh. So uh that's one of the things that was really cool about this first 100-mile run. Since it was on a loop, they were able to, on that last loop, finish with me, right? And so as I'm coming through and finishing up that very last lap, I'm letting them come through the finish line and kind of metaphorically break the tape before me and lead the way before me, and just kind of let them know, like, you guys are first. You guys are priority in my life. I'm doing this, guys, to try to help and support you guys, or show you guys, try to normalize impossible things to you guys, right? And so I got to have them to step out in front of me and finish the race in front of me, which was really cool. And so yeah, it's a so it's such a good topic. It's one that I actually had with the jester out there, and the 13-year-old that was out there. So the 13-year-old out there was the daughter of the race director. And the year prior, she did 50 miles, I think, in like a 48-hour time frame. Um, and she was out there this year just trying to break the 50-mile mark. So she's 13, right? And she looks like any other average 13-year-old girl, right? Like she's um and she's out there and she's getting in these miles. And so I was out there, it was us three walking together, and I'm like, hey, talking to Ed, or the jester, I'm like, hey, so when when did you start doing this, and kind of getting his background. And I'm asking him this question because I want to know, like, how is this going to be for my kids? Like, one of the things we were talking about leading up to this was how, we got talking, and he's like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I work with addiction and trauma." And he's like, "Oh, okay, funny you're doing this." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's funny that probably, he's like, I think there's a lot of people out here that are dealing with trauma or have had trauma." I'm like, "Yeah, there's an interesting correlation there." So we were just kind of talking about that stuff. And then he's talking about his kids and how, I think he said his daughter at 11 he had his daughter at 11 run her first marathon, and took her out and ran her first marathon. And the doctors got pissed at him and were like, you're going to disrupt her growth palace.
Hmm.
She's not going to be able to grow now. And he's like, well, she's 6'1" now, so I don't know, maybe she didn't need to grow anymore.
Had the opposite effect.
But
She grew more.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and then I asked the 13-year-old young lady out there, like, hey, how is this for you? Because you've obviously grown up around running. How is this for you? And she's like, this is just normal. This is kind of like for me to be out here and do this. I don't even really talk to my friends about it, because I don't think they really understand. But to me, this is normal. So like running over 50 miles isn't normal, but to have the idea to achieve such a thing is normal. And to me, that was big. I'm like, whoa, okay. So the idea of doing something that, like, she could conceive it's hard, but the idea of doing something that was hard was normal to her.
Hmm.
And so for me, that was a big thing that I took out of that little moment in the run, in that conversation, where I'm like, okay, so this is exactly what I'm trying to do for my kids. I hope they're not out there running ultras because they're traumatized by life. That's my
Sure.
hope.
Sure.
But I do hope, if they want, it doesn't need to be ultra marathons. It could be anything. I want to normalize challenge for them. I want to normalize they can go out there and do something that feels impossible, but they still can try it. And that's what I want to do with that. So to answer your question, they, especially my two older kids, I think they know that this is kind of a newer thing that daddy's been doing. But also, all of them, their entire lives, I've been regularly and routinely going out and exercising, going out into the gym and lifting or something, or going out into the gym and doing yoga. So they know that I'm exercising on a regular basis, and we have a relatively active lifestyle. They go outside and they run out on the property. I have them do hill sprints and different things. And
Yeah.
right now it's not a punishment for them. It's fun. Like, they,
Yeah.
they enjoy the stuff. And so,
Yeah.
and they're like, it's crazy. They're natural runners for the most part. My oldest, he's running 8-minute miles right now. And my youngest is not too far behind him. My youngest is free. The dude is fast, and he just keeps going and going. And so I'll take him to the track and just let them have at it. Like, let's see how you do.
Yeah.
They push themselves and they try hard, and that's normal to them. They're not like, I'm not needing to be down the throat. Come on, buddy, push harder. Go, you can do it. Come on, get more. Go. I'm not
Sure.
doing any of that. They're just out there doing it. They're just out there doing the best that they can. And their best is impressive to me. So yeah, I think that's it. And whatever their kind of goals and aspirations are in life, I hope it is that they're seeking to push themselves and make themselves better in whatever it is, or the best version of whatever that is. And that can only come through going about it and doing the hard thing, or doing the thing that is challenging. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that, man. I think that's an interesting thing that's come up on this podcast before when I've talked to a couple of other dads, and they were saying something similar where for their kids, seeing dad go out at 4:30 in the morning, either to go to the gym or go on a run, is just part of life. So it's not this weird thing where it's like, where's that dude going? Oh, I guess he's going to work out. It's just like, oh yeah, every day they do X, Y, or Z in a physical way, right? They're working out, lifting weights, running, whatever it might be, and that it is a cool thing because it just becomes the standard, right? It just becomes the norm. It becomes what you expect. And to your point, with that 13-year-old girl, yeah, it's not just the physical activity and the fitness part of it that's just normal for her, but it's this mentality, right? The mentality of, hey, right, striving for great things is normal. It's just what you do. And if
Yeah.
that's your baseline for life, especially at 13 or even younger for your boys, like that's a pretty cool thing because you can if you can only go up from that point, I mean, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah. And it shows itself like it shows itself in their little athletic endeavors that they do and different things that they do. They're like, they're far smarter than I am. They already probably have a higher reading level than I did than what I graduated with. So like my kids just sit there and read their books in the bed. I'm like, I've never done that in my life. Like they're reading books and I've never done that. But yeah, so it's incredible to see at a young age. Yeah, I don't know. That's all I could really say about that. I'm pretty inspired by them.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. One, I've always been around people that, like yourself, do these things, one, because you want to challenge yourself personally, but then there's also a greater goal beyond that. And I think I always feel like that's a key piece to doing any kind of endurance sports. I'm sure there's some people out there that do that type of thing for themselves only. I'm sure that exists, but I always felt that it's the best version of that is when you have someone that is striving for a bigger goal, whether they're raising money for some cause they're passionate about. Like I know for yourself, you run for the fund. I'm blanking on the name. The fund.
Fun to run
Um,
for one.
Thank you. The fund run for
Yeah.
one. Obviously, that's a huge driving force for yourself. But then beyond that, you're the example and the leadership that you're setting for your kids. Like I just that's one of the cool things about that is that it really anybody can do it. It doesn't have to be an ultra marathon. It could be a 5K. It could be a 1 mile run. It could be a marathon. Everything in between. But having that greater purpose or that greater cause is huge. A huge driving force. I think at least for me, it seems like it's a huge mental advantage when you have that type of thing that's driving you.
Yeah. Yeah. And to kind of, I guess, like, what would I say? Like, agree with what you're saying in terms of the distances. The distances don't matter. What matters is that it's terrifying. That's what matters. Like what if it's a 5K, if it's a 1 mile, like if the thing terrifies you to do it, then that's the thing. That's the thing to do. Yeah. And it's good then to kind of start off, I don't know, like this is a weird thing for me to say because I think it's twofold. Like for me, my like building up my window of tolerance or building up my capacity, my resiliency, um, over years has been this kind of steady progression. And then out of nowhere, I did that marathon without training for it, right? And then that just kind of shattered everything that came before it. So, um, yeah, there's something to doing something utterly insane like that and bordering on stupidity, um, that can just kind of shatter the norm, shatter the idea of what you're capable of. But from a more practical standpoint, for I guess anybody, if they don't have this kind of, if they don't have maybe a long history of slowly building up and building up and building up, and just it doesn't have to be toward one thing. It can just be towards different things in life, like different challenges in life, going back to college or something, right? Like different types of challenges, leaving this job to go to that job, or leaving this person, that sort of stuff. But whatever the challenge is, doing something incredibly hard, starting with, you know, smaller blocks first is probably probably a better way to go about it. So if it's a 1 mile, or whatever is the comparison of a 1 mile thing, and then kind of building off of that is a good way to go too.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just have a few more. I don't want to keep you too late tonight. I would just have a couple more questions for you, but that's interesting. Do you, especially in your profession, for some people, do you think is it? How do I want to word this? To what you just said, for some people, is it really like the way they're built, the way their mind works, the way they're wired? Are there some people that just need to jump in the deep end in order for that thing to work? Like, do they have to, like yourself, right? You went out and just said, "Hey, I'm going to do a marathon without training," and here we go. Seems to have worked out pretty well for you. Someone else that maybe wouldn't have worked as well. That may have been the thing that was too terrifying for him, and completely is like, "I will never do that again. Get me out of here." Where that person would have been better off having smaller blocks. Where maybe someone with a more extreme personality is like, if I take smaller steps, I'm never going to get there. Like I got to jump in with both feet, or I am not going to conquer this thing. Like, is there something to that, or is it, you know, is it just like an excuse for someone? It's like, oh, if I take too many small steps, I'm not going to make it, and it's just they're finding like excuses to get out of it. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like,
Yeah,
is that a personality thing, or is it just, I don't know. I got a little lost in my words there, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say.
it's late. It's late,
Yeah,
so
it's late.
it's
It's late.
fair. Yeah, so there are people who don't have the resiliency built up for whatever reason, whether it's like just a ton of unhealed trauma, whether it's just a ton of like just being beaten down by life, being told you're terrible over and over and over, having awful experiences in life, where jumping into the deep end is a terrible idea.
Hmm,
Maybe for them, the version of jumping into the deep end is just trying to stop drinking,
sure.
or trying to stop smoking pot every day, or trying to stop whatever. Maybe that's their version of the deep end. um their version of the deep end isn't, or where somebody else, it might be, I should never drink again, and they take that as this personal challenge to try to make that true. And for a lot of other people, the idea of again is so overwhelming, they're not even going to try.
Sure.
So step it back to, I'm not going to drink for the next 5 hours. I'm not going to drink for the next 24 hours.
Sure.
So there's this kind of micro goals process that needs to happen. The way I try to help people out with it is there's like, you have a overarching standard. This is like something that is unshakable. This is either who you are or who you want to be, but there is a standard, there's a theme that says this is what I'm about. This is who Josh Takamoto is. Like this is who this is. And then you and I would challenge clients to even write that out. Okay, write out what that looks like. And this is a theme, or this is a standard that falls in line with whatever your core value is. Let's make it simple and say, I don't quit.
Hmm.
Right. Okay. So I don't quit is a simple one. Okay. So um, then off of that, you begin to build objectives underneath that to help support and make this reality happen.
Sure.
So you build some objectives that says, okay, here's this thing that I'm going to do and challenge myself and not quit. Here's another thing that I'm going to make sure that I do on a daily basis to not and follow through with it. And then you can have all these different things where it's like, underneath those objectives, you build little tiny micro goals to help said objective be complete so that you can meet the said standard. Right. So you have all these little things, and there's a lot of different ways of doing this. You can do this in the rule of three and all these different ways of doing it. Um, but an important piece in here, what a lot of people miss is within what I call the standards and objectives, within whatever your micro goals are, the things that you want to achieve, there's got to be this thing called grace and boundaries, what I call grace and boundaries. So grace and boundaries, well, we know what boundaries are. Boundaries is this thing. Like I'm making a statement. This is truth, or this is what's going to happen. And then, but the way I like to try to help people with boundaries is I would say there are some boundaries that are rigid. There are some boundaries that have no flex to them whatsoever. So for me, it would be like, I'll never use a mind altering substance again. Pretty rigid boundary, right?
Sure.
And I don't want there to be any flex in that.
Sure.
And then there's other boundaries where, or I would say very few boundaries. Let's say 5% of your boundaries are going to be these rigid boundaries. These,
Sure.
I'll never cheat on my wife. I'll never, whatever, all these sort of obvious things. Some things are so obvious you don't even need to set a boundary for it, right?
Sure.
But then the majority of your boundaries are going to have flex to them. Think of them almost like there's a bungee cord in between, and you're just kind of, you can flex it and push up against it a little bit in order to continue and keep back on track. So if you push up against that boundary, it's just going to kind of push you back and keep you back onto course.
Sure.
So let's say I have a boundary of, okay, I'm going to, today is chest and triceps day, or no, let's do something more realistic. Today is deadlifts and squats day, right? So today is deadlifts and squats, and 2 days ago I ran 15 miles, and I woke up today and my back is feeling it, my knees are feeling it. It's just, I'm feeling awful. So I could be rigid and be like, no, I'm going to go and I'm going to do these squats and these deadlifts. Or I can be like, what is the overall intention? What is my overall standard that I'm trying to complete here? The standard here is that I'm trying to be somebody who lives a healthy life and takes care of his body. Okay, so how can I still meet that standard while giving myself some grace and maybe flexing on the boundary a little bit? So maybe instead I'm just going to do some yoga. I'm going to do an hour of yoga instead. So the overarching standard is still being met. I'm taking care of myself. I want to take care of my body, whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How I kind of
100%.
put that out.
100%.
So if you can kind of lay that out based on the structure of the premise on what is challenging, what is terrifying, but also like what is potentially achievable.
Sure.
Start off with that, like what's potentially achievable, and then you can begin to stretch yourself out to what is impossible. Let me try that. But that's over time where you've kind of built up this natural trust with yourself, where when you become the person, like you say you're going to do something and you follow through with it, when you become that person by doing all of these smaller goals over a long period of time, then you can start to take on these endeavors where you're really jumping into the deep water, as you put it. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to do this impossible thing. And the reason why I know it's impossible is because I've never done it. I've never even come close to it. So let me go and try this thing. So let me go try running 100 miles. There's no reason why I think I should be able to do that. I've never come close to running 100 miles, but let's go do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was good. Thank you for taking the ball and running with it after I gave you a horrible handoff. Like that was one of the worst questions I've asked in the last couple of weeks. It's like I was good for a while and then just kind of veered off into just a nonsense. So,
Right.
no, that's great, man. I appreciate that. I appreciate that answer, and I think that just goes back to this idea of like you said, it's you know, you worded it way more eloquently, but this idea of the limits, right? And what terrifies you is anybody can do any of these things and push themselves. And the way you just laid it out there is a perfect blueprint on how someone who maybe is terrified of everything can find some easy practical steps and starting to stretch themselves and evolve into a person who can take on more challenging things. So I think that's great, man. Before we get out of here, though, I did want to ask, and I could ask you a million more questions about the running and your race and all that stuff. And I'm sure Deb's going to listen and be upset that she wasn't here for this, because she probably has, because she's a PE teacher. She has the kinesiology background. She's much smarter than I am. And so she could have asked way better questions when it came to all of that. But unfortunately, you're stuck with me and the dumb questions about music and food. But before we get out of here and we kind of leave the running world, you mentioned here, and it was one of my questions I had written down for you, the podcast. I know you put out a story a little while ago about, hey, you said something funny like, would you listen? Would you listen once and then go back to Rogan? Or would you just not tune in at all? And I wasn't sure how much of that was serious or was a joke, but it sounds like, based on what you've been saying here, it's a legit thing. So tell me a little bit about what your plan is for that. I don't know if you, even I don't even know if you have it fully fleshed out yet, but what's the goal with the podcast?
Yeah, this is one of those jumping into the deep waters thing. You know, like that's it's a terrifying thing for me. Like I can do one-on-one talk, but and then now we have a camera and now I'm saying and so
Sure.
and I'm like stuttering over all my words,
Those ums and ahs
and
come
all
for
of a
everybody.
sudden,
Yeah.
yeah, and all of a sudden I sound way less intelligent. But so see what I but so
Hey man, look, you're
the
across the screen
podcast
from
is,
me, so you're still gonna look way smarter because you're next to me. So you're good, man.
yeah, the podcast is something I've been wanting to do for a long time, because there's podcasts out there that are on like the topic of, you know, resiliency or doing challenging things. um I don't know if there's many podcasts that's kind of the specific theme.
Sure.
Like there might be, I don't know, I'm just not aware of them. But the majority of the podcasts that have this kind of as like an underlining theme is the guests that they're talking to are like you know, like superstars and like, you
Yeah.
know, the big names. Like let's talk to Michael Phelps about doing hard things. Like, okay,
Sure.
you
Sure.
know, and but like I said, what about this person named Lindsay Boston that's been through more physical trauma and emotional trauma in a short period of time? Not that she grew up with it, but all of a sudden sprung on her as an adult. Boom! All of a sudden, all of your physical capabilities are taken care of, or are gone. All of your
Sure.
physical capabilities are they're poof, gone. You
Yeah.
know, you can't walk without
Mm.
stopping for a minute and then passing out or having a seizure. All of a sudden, that's gone. Well, I'm not hearing these people on podcast, and so I want to hear the person who is like your next door neighbor. I want to hear that person's story. I
Sure.
want to hear the person who's standing next to you in the grocery store line. I want to hear that person's story, and kind of take from other people's wisdom and experiences of life that, you know, even to somebody like me who, you know, fancies himself a resiliency guy, um, you know, I want to learn from these people. I want to learn from everybody. I want people to tell me about their experiences and their challenges and how they overcame it and what tools got them there and all that kind of stuff. That's the conversation I want to be having with people. So yeah, I'm to the point now to where I think I got a logo.
Nice.
I got this idea of what it's going to look like. I got an idea of what people I want to invite in, whether they
Yeah.
become whether they take up the invitation or not. And then yeah, so I'm kind of working out some of the kinks of like, where am I going to do it? You know, like um am I going to do it maybe in my shipping container gym? Am I going to get enough like internet in there to be able to do
Sure.
it?
Yeah. You don't want to
So
be
I'm kind
betrayed
of,
by the internet.
yeah, working out those kind of kinks. I think my first episode, I figure with my first episode, it's got to be with somebody I'm comfortable and familiar with. So I figure I'm going to interview my 9-year-old, so that'll be fun.
Hey,
uh
nice.
yeah. And yeah, that's kind of it. Do you want to hear the intro? I wrote out this
Oh,
intro.
dude. Yeah. Let me hear the intro.
All right,
You guys are getting an exclusive. I just want to let you know that on the
yeah,
Connectable
this is
podcast.
so the podcast is called the Patina'd podcast. Patina'd.
Okay.
And so the reason why I'm calling it the Patina'd podcast is I was on a long run a while back, and I was just kind of having this thought, and I'm um, like there's something to like people are always trying to find like this like retro, like finding something that looks retro but actually is brand new, right?
Sure.
Like and what is it that's appealing about that, and what is it that's appealing to this something that looks old and withered and worn in but actually isn't. And it's something because there's like a respect that we have towards something that is like lived and it existed and has scars and doesn't look totally fancy, but like looks like it might have some rust. And
Sure.
so I'm like, there's something to that to where um like the retro thing is just people trying to like cut the line a little bit and trying to get the same sense but without actually earning it.
Sure.
So I came up with this idea of patinaed, and patinaed is like this earned wisdom. Patinaed is like earned wisdom that you can only get by getting out there and getting the scars, having the blood show up, having the pain and the tears and that type of stuff. That's what patinaed is. So I'm calling this
I love it.
podcast the Patinaed podcast. And so the Patinaed podcast is about earned wisdom found in pain. It's about chasing failure, catching it, and using it as an opportunity. It's about scar tissue and sinew. It's about stretch marks and dented fenders and refusing to hide them. It's about pushing our insecurities and our shame to the forefront instead of behind us. Instead of seeing rust as something that compromises a structure's integrity, we choose to see it as grit that builds character. That's
That's
it.
good, man.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, I think a lot of people are gonna really enjoy that podcast. 'Cause I think there's probably a lot of people out there, whether they realize it or not, that have the same thoughts that you do, where it's like, hey, it's cool that this person has achieved great things, but they're also a freak athlete. And just
Mm.
naturally, they have a couple of things that I'm never going to have. Right. And so hearing those stories from people, like you said, neighbors, people that your kids go to school with, and the parents of the people that you go to school with, and all of those different spaces in life that you see every single day. I think there's a ton of value in that. And I think I bet you're gonna see a lot of people want to be, because you mentioned, whoever accepts the invite. I imagine a lot of people are going to be willing to do it. And I think something we found on this podcast is there's been plenty of times over the course of all these 150 something episodes where there's been people like, I don't even know why you would want to talk to me on this podcast. And a lot of times they're like, I've never done a podcast. I don't know if I feel comfortable. Those turn out to be some of the best conversations. And
Mm.
it's interesting once they get on there and they're able to kind of connect with us and have those conversations and share their story. It is a pretty cool experience. So man, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what comes of your podcast for sure. Because I think it's going to help a ton of people, man.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that. I hope so. I don't know how many people are going to actually listen in. Like according to that Instagram post and question that I had, there's going to probably be one person that listens in, and I'll thank my wife for that. She'll be my number one fan. But yeah, we'll see how it turns out.
Hey, man. Well, you let us know when you start it, and we'll share and all that stuff, and we want to help support for sure. But um, man, this has been a fun conversation, man. I appreciate you coming back on the show. This won't be the last time. We'll have to have you on again at some point too. Um,
Yeah, I had notes here. I'm like, we could talk about stress.
that's how it goes, man. That the time flies. When I first started podcasting, someone was like, how do you talk? Like they're like, how long is your podcast? I said, well, it usually runs between 45 and an hour. And they're like, what? Like, how do you talk that long? It's like you'd be surprised. It's pretty easy once you start going. And then all of a sudden you look at the clock. It's like I've gone through half my questions and we're already way past time. So it's just the thing about podcasting. It's just a fun conversation. It's just regular conversation that we would have in everyday life, and the time flies. So we'll definitely have to have you back on, man, to talk about whenever you do your 200, 300, 400-mile run, whatever's next for you.
Yeah, the next thing is rucking, man. I think after the
Oh,
CIM after the marathon in December, I'm gonna take on rucking for a few months at least. So we'll see. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, hey man, I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to hearing how that goes.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna be the weird guy because rucking isn't popular here in California, especially not in Northern California. So I'm gonna be the weird guy showing up to an ultra with a backpack on and weight in it. Because there's no rucking events nearby. But anyway, so yeah.
I feel like my old high school baseball coach, I feel like he was into that for a while, but I don't know where he did it. It might have been the Bay Area. They ever do it out there?
They have them like in San Diego. They have some rucking events in San Diego.
Okay.
I don't want to drive out that far, so I'm
That
just going to
makes
show up
sense.
to local ultra events here with a backpack and let people look at me weird.
Hey, you
Yeah,
never know. You might be a trendsetter though.
yeah,
Then the
yeah,
next year
maybe.
is like more Ruckers. I mean, yeah, you never know. You never know.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome, man. Well, we look forward to continuing to follow your journey. But obviously, it's called Connectable. If people are interested in everything that you do, first, like I said this earlier, I'll say it again. Make sure you go back and listen to Kenny's previous episode to kind of get his backstory, everything he's gone through, and why he does what he does with Recovery Hill. But if they want to get connected with you, if they want to follow, and your running journey, or if they want to get connected with you as far as Recovery Hill, or if they want to donate to your next fundraiser, all those different things, where can they follow you and get connected?
yeah. So I guess Instagram is one of them. So that's Kenny. I think what is it at Kenny underscore Kenny underscore from underscore Recovery Hill. Kenny from Recovery Hill. I think that's it.
I'm gonna pull it up real quick. We gotta
This
make sure
is
we get this
just it's
right for
it's
the
so
people.
bad. I don't even know.
That's Hey, you're not alone. This happens all the time. So it's at Kenny underscore from underscore Recovery Hill.
There you go.
There you
Yeah, so
go.
there's that, and then there's the YouTube channel is at Recovery Hill. And then I got a website for my practice, which is recoveryhill.info is the website. And yeah, you can find me through all those means and reach out if you want to connect in whatever variety you want to connect in.
Make sure you guys follow Kenny. Everything that he's doing some awesome things. And yeah, man, like I said, we appreciate the time, especially with, between family, running, everything that you're doing. We do appreciate you taking some time to chat with us. And man, until next time, good luck with everything, and we'll talk to you later.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching the show. If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you like it, share it, and hit the subscribe button to get a new episode every week. We'll see you next time on the Connectable Podcast.